Bertilsdotter. I'm going to think or talk a little bit about the Swedish experiences. And I want to say first, okay, Swedish is a welfare country, but it's not the welfare country maybe it was 20 years ago. So it's a hugely change going on in Sweden. So we become more and more into a kind of neoliberal kind of state, I suppose. But first, some kind of ideological context for what we are kind of putting autism into. So in general, we have this kind of main idea about people with disabilities as they are formerly part of different kinds of institutions. And in the early 90s, we wanted them to be part of society. So there was a huge... Yeah, sure. No, it's fine. So it was a huge process to take people from the institutions in the early 90s into society. And part of that process was informed by this idea of normalization. And I just want to go through the 8 main points of that. So the first is normal circadian, which is to be in a kind of normal time rhythm, and normal weekly rhythm, average annual rhythm, and the normal stage of development that you're supposed, even if you have a severe disability, you're supposed to be age through the different development stages. You're supposed to experience different parts of life, not stay in a specific kind of age, such as early adulthood or late adolescence. And then it's also a part of this normalizations idea is that you are supposed to get your own demands respected. You're supposed to have your own voice in different important decisions who is important in your life. But also to live in a world of two sexes. You're not supposed to be in a care surroundings with only, for instance, female carers, but you're supposed to be experiencing the world in a two-sex way, because that's also part of what's assumed to be part of the normal life. And then normal economic standard, you're supposed to be able to do things that other people can do, to have some kind of access to economic possibilities. And also normal building standards, which is not only to be able to live in a building which you can kind of access, but it's also be part of it as integrated into society. So the principle of integration is integration into mainstream society. It's not only to be in society like in the closed formal institutions. And this is very much informed, I think, when it comes to mental health and people with cognitive disabilities. But while autism is such, in some ways, coming from this history, it's also part of the history of people with autism. Okay, next. So this is that kind of idea which is informing our kind of crown in our Swedish Disability Policy Act, which is the LSS, or Swedish Act concerning support and service for persons with certain functional impairments. And it's supposed to guarantee good living conditions and ensuring that people receive the help they need in daily life, and that they also can influence, that's really important, they can influence the support and service they receive. It's not like you just get different kinds of supports, but it's supposed to be actively part of the decision of what support you're going to get. And interesting also this, because I'm going to show you next slide, is 10 different points of this act, and not everybody is included in all the different 10 points, but it's like a hierarchy of disabilities. So the first group of people with disabilities, the first group, is the one who have some kind of intellectual disability, including people with autism. And that means that people who has Asperger or quite high functioning autism is also included in this first person credits, person thing. And then the second is people mostly with physical disabilities. And the third is one for the people who has different mental illness, including people who have ADHD, which means we have people who may have quite severe impairments who don't get into the kind of first person because they don't have autism, but they may have autistic traits, but they get a diagnosis of ADHD, which means they are excluded from the first person group. So it's, in that case, it's much better to have a diagnosis of autism, because that makes you are given a better position when this act. And some people with ADHD really wants to get an diagnosis of autism because they may be severely impaired, but they need to. That's a kind of big context thing. Yeah. So it's a very costly reform, of course. This was in Sweden. It was in 1995. We got this reform. So there's a lot of discussions about people who don't get what they are kind of supposed to get by law, because there are different local interpretations of the law. Some local communities can't afford everything they are kind of supposed to give them. And also there's a lot of media huntings about people who kind of using these possibilities but are not really disabled. And also stories about relatives who kind of using this in different ways. So that's kind of big two-sidedness of this reform, that it's both very liberating, giving people much more freedom and possibilities to choose and to take responsibility for their own life, but it's also kind of doing things like making the public think that there are a lot of people who is kind of using this law in a not good way. And also increase audit practices that is common with people, even if you have a diagnosis of autism or some really lifelong illness or impairment, you are still repeatedly have to go through the application process and get your kind of needs scrutinized once in a while, so on, which is quite embarrassing. Okay, next. So this is a kind of backside thing. And I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but it's a lot of things you can kind of, you are kind of able to receive through this law. So I go next. So this is a kind of, the general disability context in Sweden. And when it comes to autism, we have a long tradition of advocacy from the parents, which formed the society in 1973, mostly in I would say in opposing to ideas of autism influenced by psychoanalysis. So not in 1973, but quite soon, this brain idea of autism was kind of used in this movement just to make this person more strong. And they have been very influential in Swedish discussion about autism, and it's quite soon when the adults with autism, mostly Asperger or high-functioning autism, started to make demands within this parent-dominated movement, that they also want to be part of rights of interpretation and defining what is actually autism and what is the need of people with autism. So first, what I've been studying for some time is a project which was funded and made within this Society of Autism called the Empowerment Project, which was it was really a good idea to try to make people in the movement with autism to be more influent and kind of take place within the movement. So at first, I think in the beginning of 2000, I think it was kind of friendly cooperation between self-advocates as people with autism and parents to children with autism. But it starts to be a kind of tension quite soon. And in 2006, there was an organization which I've been studying a bit called Organized Asperger's, which was formed. And first they're called Organized Autistics, like a little bit of play with words. But that was mostly formed in opposition and in very angriness with this kind of as a parent-dominating movement. So the manifest which they were sending out as a press release in 2009 was, we want to gather the country's Asperger's further in an organization of our own that we feel that we ourselves have created, and therefore for our own actions. With regards to our questions, there are so far only been parent organizations in which we, with a diagnosis of our own, has been around on the fly, but most often dominated by parents, and they offer a largely, totally different perspective. And interestingly enough, I think that the parent-dominated movement is mostly, this is a disability, and they are really focusing on how to, not curing, but how to make people with autism behaving or being adapted to the general society. Not really, it's more a reformative idea that people with autism should have different kinds of rights and support, but it's very kind of being part of society and being as neurotypical as possible, while this organized Asperger's is more focusing on both needs and strength, and also is informed by, in the work, by the ideas of neurodiversity and empowerment. So I first met with people from this organized Asperger's, I don't know if it was 2009 I heard about this organization, and they have been kind of, they are not very big, I think it's about 160 people in the whole Sweden, but they are kind of interesting, and it's very much of trying to make a little space for themselves and get some kind of recognition in the kind of Swedish policy context, but also in Sweden in general, while it has been so dominated by the parent-dominated movement. So the first project, because why we have this LSS, this law for disability policies, it's very much of enabling people to have their kind of normal life. And part of this is to get work, either outside the regular work employment market, or with some support to be part of the regular work employment, the labor market. So these organized Asperger's were receiving funding for a project by the Swedish Inheritance Fund 2014, and the project started in 2015, and it's a 3-year-long project which is focusing on how to enable people with autism to be on the regular labor market, because they thought there's a lot of money who's going into different kinds of support strategies through the LSS. There's a lot of thinking that we need to do different things with all people with autism to make them, enable them on the ordinary labor market. But there's a lot of those support strategies that doesn't work, because it's not on, they are not on autistic people's own terms, and they are not adapted to how people with autism is really functioning. They are more adapted, or it's like you make different kinds of strategies which is informed by a neurotypical point of view, and you try to make people with autism function within this neurotypical frame of thinking. So they said, no, this isn't working, we have to do this ourselves. We have to produce or develop different kinds of methods which is informed by our ways of thinking, because I think this is what is going to function. That was kind of the main idea. So I've been following this project since it started as a kind of researcher besides, and having focus groups for them every month. And they suddenly thought it was a good idea to make a book based on the ideas and experiences during this project. So the project is named Autistic Initiative, and its name it says it's a working life-oriented inherited fund project. It's run by organized Asperger's and caters to highly functioning autistics employers on the regular labor market. Through courses and tutoring, autistic people can develop their abilities for a professional role, while worker places attention to how the competence can be utilized. This is a Google translation, so I hope it works. But it's also, that was the kind of main idea, that this autistic initiative is going to make different kinds of courses which kind of enable people with autism to realize and to see their abilities and use their abilities in a kind of more productive way. But it also has become an interesting space in itself. It's a really physical space. It's a place where people, both the productor, the group who is kind of doing these courses, but it's also become kind of company in itself, like a social company. So I think it's both this project which is partly doing different kinds of courses, but it's also this workspace, a space for developing tools for self-understanding, self-development, autistic coaching, which is quite amazing. That they have been developing different kinds of methods through this process. There was kind of 5 people in the beginning who was all high-functioning people with autism, and they were starting to develop different kinds of methods for themselves and for the participants in those courses, and how to do different kinds of things. So part of the method had been to coach each other as to very, very concretely how are we going to work together as an autistic work group, but also how we're going to kind of enable people on the spectrum. So okay, next. So the book is, I'm not going to go through all of this, but just to give you an imaginary of what it's part or what we are trying to do. The book is, I'm the editor because they wanted me to do some, to handle the whole thing. But the text is written by the people in the project. So it's all kinds of text, but around different kinds of themes, which they themselves found interesting. And they've been, first this introduction, and it's a lot about what is the idea behind the project and what is neurodiversity, what is, different kinds of background stories. But also about writer space, which is a method, and how, if you're a group of autistic people, and how to make the group write texts about different kinds of experiences of autism. So it's like, it's both a book about different kinds of knowledges that have been producing, but it's also about the methods, not only methods to write and to be able to coach each other as writers about different kinds of things, but it's also about different kinds of how to produce your own strategies. It's like a lot of this can take next. It's just different. Next. Next. The format. Yeah. So there's a lot of self-stories about how do I experience emotions, how do I experience friendships, how do I experience my ways of functioning generally, like recovery, energy, whatever. But it's also a lot about strategies and how do you use your abilities to kind of be able to handle your weaknesses, and also how to produce new strategies. So it's not only to, this is a strategy I use when I have to do this and that, but also how am I going to use new strategies? How is my kind of strategy toolbox? That kind of production. And the final thing is a kind of autistic manifesto, which I found quite interesting. So that's the kind of latest final chapter. And that's partly based on those experiences and those knowledges who's been produced or is still produced. So first, the need for coaching as people, the autistic to autistic coaching. It's not a neurotypical thing. It's an insider thing, the insider knowledge. To have a personal kind of autistic coach. So they are very concretely doing this. They have been in the group. They have been paired. So each member of that group have a coach from that group. So if I have my autistic buddy here, we are meeting each other through Skype or something once in a while, or probably once in a week, and discuss what are we going to do this week, and what as this kind of personal coaching with another person with autism, rather than using neurotypical coaches who's in this perspective doesn't understand what is the problems. You have to understand me in order to give me support. And also the idea that high-functioning people with autism can coach more low-functioning people with autism. So it's a kind of, this is not only for people with high-functioning autism, but also their ideas or their strategies or their experiences can be used with people who is less high-functioning. Yeah, I can stop there.